Aliens found Earth's final warship. Then thousands of human ships answered. Fleet Marshal Threx stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devourer of Stars, and looked at the dead system on the main screen. The system had once been called Proxima. Now it was just rubble, dust and broken metal floating in the dark. His fleet had burned every human colony here 3 weeks ago. It had been easy. Too easy, if he was honest with himself. Threx was a Skarn, one of the oldest and proudest species in known space. His people had conquered 41 worlds in the last 200 years. They had wiped out 3 other spacefaring races before they even had time to build proper defenses. The Skarn were not cruel for no reason. They believed, truly believed, that weaker races needed to be removed, so that stronger ones could grow. It was simple. It was the way of the galaxy. And humans, in Threx's eyes, were weak. Weak, but stubborn. That was the strange thing about them. He had expected the war to end months ago. His scouts had reported that Earth's main battle fleet had been destroyed in the Battle of Ceres, a fight that Threx himself had led. Human ships had been torn apart. Video feeds from that battle still played in the officers' mess sometimes. Human ships spinning out of control, explosions blooming silently in the vacuum of space. It had been glorious. It had also been, Threx thought, a little too easy. Fleet Marshal, his second in command, a Skarn named Vex, approached with a datapad in his clawed hand. Our scouts have found something at the edge of the Sol system. Threx turned from the screen. What kind of something? A ship, a single human warship. Our scanners say it is old, very old, built with technology from before the war even started, maybe 40 years ago. It is heavily damaged. Life support is failing. Weapons are mostly offline. Threx felt a small thrill of interest. One ship? Alone? Yes, Fleet Marshal. Our best guess is that this is the last combat vessel humanity has left. Everything else has either been destroyed or has surrendered. This ship's transponder identifies it as the UEF. Gideon's Wrath. UEF, United Earth Fleet. Threx said the words slowly, tasting them. He had learned some human words during the war, mostly names of ships and commanders he had killed. A poetic name for a dying ship. Show me. The screen changed. A small image appeared, a lone vessel drifting near the outer edge of the solar system, far past the orbit of the planet humans called Neptune. The ship was long and narrow, built in the old human style, with rows of gun turrets along its spine, many of them dark and silent. Half of its hull was scarred black from old battle damage. One of its engines trailed a thin stream of gas into space, a sign that something inside was leaking and dying. It is broadcasting a message, Vex said, on a loop. Would you like to hear it? Play it. A voice came through the speakers, a human voice, male, tired but steady. The translation software converted the words into the Skarn tongue, a half-second after the human spoke them. This is Captain Marcus Hale, of the United Earth Fleet vessel, Gideon's Wrath. If you are hearing this, you are likely an enemy of Earth. I want you to know something before you destroy this ship. Humanity is not finished. We are never finished. Come and see for yourself. The message looped back to the beginning and played again. Threx laughed, a low rumbling sound that came from deep in his chest. Around him, several of the bridge officers laughed too, though more quietly, watching their commander for his reaction. A brave message from a dying man, Threx said. Or a foolish one, perhaps both. Vex, what is your reading on this ship's weapons and shields? Weapons are at less than 10% capacity, Fleet Marshal. Shields appear to be down entirely. The ship could not survive a single volley from even one of our smallest escort vessels. Then it seems the great and terrible last warship of Earth is nothing more than a wounded animal, crawling to its den to die. Threx settled back into his command chair. He felt satisfaction settle over him like a warm blanket. This was the end then. The final human resistance, reduced to one broken ship, and a captain who spoke brave words into an empty void. Bring the fleet in. I want to see this ship with my own eyes before we destroy it, and record everything. I want this moment preserved. The day the human war finally ended. The Skarn fleet moved. It was not a small fleet. Threx commanded 83 warships, from small fast attack craft to massive dreadnoughts larger than human cities. They had come to finish the job. to make sure that no human colony, no human ship, no human anything remained that could threaten Skarn control of this part of space. 83 ships against one crippled vessel. It should have taken minutes. As the fleet approached the edge of the solar system, Threx studied the reports coming in about human history, gathered by Skarn intelligence over the years of war. Humans were an unusual species. They did not surrender easily, even when defeat was certain. They fought in small groups long after their main armies fell. They built weapons out of scraps when their factories were destroyed. Some Skarn officers found this behavior baffling. Threx found it almost respectable, in the way one might respect a stubborn insect that refused to stop crawling even after being stepped on. But respect changed nothing. The Skarn Dominion had a saying, old as their civilization: strength decides, weakness dies. Humanity had shown flashes of strength during the war, enough to make the conquest costly, enough to make Threx lose 11 ships and thousands of soldiers in 3 years of fighting. But in the end, strength had decided, as it always did. The great human fleets were gone. The colonies were burning, or already ash. All that remained was this one ship, broadcasting its stubborn little message into the dark. "Fleet Marshal, we are in weapons range," Vex reported. "Hold fire," Threx said. "I want to speak with this Captain Hale first. Open a channel." The bridge went quiet as the channel opened. A moment passed, then the same tired voice from before came through the speakers, though this time it was live, responding directly. "This is Gideon's Wrath. I hear you, Skarn Fleet. I've been waiting." "Captain Hale," Threx said, letting the translation software carry his words. "I am Fleet Marshal Threx of the Skarn Dominion. Your ship is the last armed vessel of your fleet, remaining in this system. Your species has lost this war. I am prepared to offer you a quick death, painless, if you power down your weapons and allow my ships to destroy your vessel without resistance. Struggle, and I promise you it will not be quick." There was a pause. When Hale spoke again, there was something in his voice that Threx could not quite place. It did not sound like fear. It sounded, strangely, like patience. "Fleet Marshal, I appreciate the offer, but I think you're a little confused about what's happening here. You didn't find humanity's last warship. You found humanity's first line, and you're about 30 seconds early." Threx frowned. "Early for what?" "For the part where you find out how many ships we actually have left." Threx opened his mouth to respond, but at that exact moment, Vex's voice cut through the bridge, sharp with alarm. "Fleet Marshal, long-range sensors are detecting massive gravitational disturbances. Multiple points, all across the outer system." Threx spun toward the main screen. New icons were appearing, dozens of them, then hundreds, then more than his sensor operators could count fast enough to display. They bloomed into existence like sudden stars, each one a wave of disturbed space where something enormous had just arrived, tearing through the fabric of the universe, in a way that Skarn engines could never manage. "What is this?" Threx demanded, though some cold part of him already suspected the answer. "Ships," Vex said, his voice shaking slightly. "Fleet Marshal, they are ships, thousands of them." The image on the main screen shifted, zooming out to show the entire outer solar system. What Threx saw made the breath catch in his throat, a reaction he had not felt in decades of war. Human warships were appearing everywhere. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. They emerged from strange folds in space that Skarn sensors had never detected before, hidden pockets that humans had somehow learned to use, cloaked and silent until this exact moment. Massive carriers unfolded their hulls. Rows of destroyers formed into battle lines with mechanical precision. Behind them, larger shapes moved into view, ships so big that Threx's mind first refused to register them as vessels at all, thinking instead that they were small moons, or asteroids, that had drifted into formation by strange coincidence. They were not asteroids. They were dreadnoughts, human dreadnoughts, bristling with weapons that Skarn scanners had never catalogued before. "That is impossible," Threx whispered. "Our intelligence reported that Earth's fleet was destroyed. Every shipyard was bombed. Every colony was scanned. There is no way humanity built this many ships without us knowing." On the comm channel, Captain Hale's voice returned, and now Threx could hear it clearly, the strange patience in his tone, the sound of a man who had been waiting a very long time for this exact moment. "You destroyed the fleet we showed you, Fleet Marshal, the the one we wanted you to see. While you were busy burning our colonies and celebrating your victory, we were building the fleet you weren't supposed to see. Every human shipyard you bombed was already empty. We moved our real production underground, into the asteroid belt, into the ice moons of the outer planets, into places your scans couldn't reach. We've been building this fleet in secret for 6 years, Fleet Marshal. 6 years, while you thought you were winning. Threx stared at the screen, at the endless rows of new icons still appearing, more and more of them, an ocean of human warships surrounding his fleet of 83 vessels, like a tide rising around a stone. That is not possible, Threx said again, quieter this time, more to himself than to anyone else. We would have known. We would have seen the resources, the metal, the fuel, the workers. You would have seen it, Hale said. If you'd been looking in the right places, but you were too busy thinking you'd already won. That's the thing about your kind, Fleet Marshal. You believe your own victories a little too easily. Vex's voice cut in again, tight with tension. Fleet Marshal, ship count has passed 4,000 and is still climbing. Their formation is complete. They have us surrounded on all vectors. Weapons are charging across their entire fleet. Threx sat very still in his command chair. 83 ships, 4,000 ships, and climbing. The math was not complicated. He had led the Skarn fleet through 40 conquests, and he knew, with the cold certainty of long experience, that this was no longer a battle he could win through strength of arms. But Threx had not risen to Fleet Marshal by panicking when the numbers turned against him. He straightened in his chair and forced his voice to remain steady. Captain Hale, he said, it seems your species has learned something about patience during this war. I will grant you that much respect, but numbers alone do not win battles. My ships are still more advanced than yours. My crews have more combat experience than any human crew still living. Do not mistake this display for a guaranteed victory. I'm not mistaking anything, Fleet Marshal, Hale replied. I just wanted you to see them before the fighting starts. I wanted you to understand exactly what's about to happen to your fleet, and why. This isn't about revenge. It's not even really about this system. It's about something simpler than that. You came here believing you'd already beaten us. You believed it so completely that you stopped being careful. That's the mistake. Not the fighting. The believing. Threx felt something old and dangerous stir inside him. A mixture of fury and, buried deep beneath it, something close to fear. He had felt fear before, rarely, only in the worst moments of his career, when death had brushed close enough to touch. He felt it now, looking at the screen full of human ships, more human ships than he had ever seen in one place, more than Skarn intelligence had ever reported existing anywhere in known space. Vex, Threx said quietly, signal the fleet, prepare for combat. Full alert, all vessels. Yes, Fleet Marshal. Vex's claws moved rapidly across his console, but Threx could see the fear in his second's posture, the way his shoulders had tightened, the way his eyes kept flicking back to the impossible numbers on the display. On the comm channel, Captain Hale spoke one final time before the connection cut out, his voice carrying clearly across the vacuum of space, calm and certain in a way that chilled Threx more than any threat could have. Welcome to the real war, Fleet Marshal. This is where it actually begins. The channel went dead. Around the crippled. Gideon's wrath. The human fleet held its position, thousands of warships waiting in perfect silence, weapons charged, engines humming, ready for the order to attack. And at the center of the Skarn formation, Fleet Marshal Threx looked at the numbers on his screen and understood, for the first time in the 6 years of this war, that he might have already lost. He had 83 ships, he had believed, until this moment, that 83 ships was more than enough to end a broken species that had already surrendered its will to fight. Now he was not so sure of anything at all. 6 years earlier, in a small meeting room deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, Admiral Rebecca Torres had stood in front of a room full of frightened generals and told them the truth. Humanity was going to lose the war if they kept fighting the way they had been fighting. The Skarn had arrived without warning, appearing in the outer solar system with a fleet unlike anything human science had ever imagined. Their ships were faster, their weapons stronger, their shields thicker. In the first battle, at the edge of Jupiter's orbit, humanity lost 40 ships in less than an hour. It was a slaughter, and everyone in that room had watched it happen on their screens, helpless to change the outcome. "We cannot beat them ship for ship," Torres had said, standing before a star map covered in red markers showing Skarn fleet positions. "Their technology is better than ours, in almost every category. Their weapons hit harder, their shields absorb more damage. If we keep building the same kind of navy we've always built, and keep fighting the same kind of battles, we will lose everything within 2 years, maybe less." A general named Okafor had stood up, anger plain on his face. "Then what do you suggest, Admiral? Surrender?" "No," Torres said. "I suggest we stop fighting the war they expect us to fight." She explained her plan slowly, carefully, watching the faces around the room shift from anger to confusion to, finally, something like hope. The plan was called Project Hydra, named after the old myth of a monster that grew 2 heads for every one that was cut off. The idea was simple to explain and brutally hard to carry out. Humanity would let the Skarn believe they were winning. They would sacrifice their visible fleet, the ships everyone could see, the shipyards everyone knew about, the colonies that could not be hidden. While the Skarn celebrated their victories, humanity would build a second fleet, in total secrecy, hidden in places the Skarn would never think to look. "We move production into the asteroid belt," Torres explained, "into the ice moons around Jupiter and Saturn. We dig shipyards into rock and ice, where their scanners can't easily see through the mineral interference. We use dead comets, hollowed-out asteroids, abandoned mining stations. We build small at first, testing everything, working out every mistake in secret, away from Skarn eyes. And every ship we lose in the visible war, every colony that falls, becomes part of the story we tell the Skarn, the story of a dying species, fighting its last battles, running out of ships and hope." "And while they believe that story," said a quiet voice from the back of the room, a young captain named Marcus Hale, who had lost his brother in the Jupiter battle 3 weeks earlier, "we're actually getting stronger." Torres nodded. "Exactly, Captain. Every year they think we're closer to defeat, we'll actually be building a fleet capable of matching them, and then surpassing them. It will not be quick. It will not be easy. We will lose worlds. We will lose people we cannot afford to lose. But if we do this right, in 6 years we will have a fleet that can end this war on our terms, not theirs." The room had been silent for a long moment after that. 6 years was a long time to ask people to suffer, to watch their homes burn, to lose loved ones, all while telling no one outside a small circle that there was a plan, that there was hope hidden beneath the surface of every defeat. "How do we keep this secret?" Okafor had asked. "The Skarn have spies, they have scanning technology. Sooner or later they'll find the hidden shipyards." "We compartmentalize everything," Torres said. "No single person outside this room will know the full scope of the project. Workers in the asteroid shipyards will believe they're building defensive stations, not warships. We'll construct false records, false reports, feed the Skarn false intelligence through channels we know they're monitoring. We'll let them intercept messages that confirm what they already want to believe, that humanity is weak, that humanity is dying. Every lie will be built carefully, layer by layer, so that when they finally see the truth, it will be far too late for them to do anything about it." It had taken years to build the network of hidden shipyards. The first ones were small, crude, carved into asteroids using mining equipment repurposed for war. Workers who signed on to these projects were told they were building deep space research stations or mining refineries. Only a small number of senior engineers and officers knew the true purpose. Slowly, carefully, the hidden fleet grew. Marcus Hale, promoted to captain after the loss of his brother, became one of the officers trusted with the deepest secrets of Project Hydra. He spent 2 years working in the hidden shipyard hollowed into the ice moon of Enceladus, helping design and test the new generation of human warships, vessels built with technology reverse-engineered from captured Skarn wreckage, combined with human ingenuity and desperation. The Skarn ships were fast because their engines used a form of compressed energy storage humanity had never encountered before. Human engineers studied pieces of wrecked Skarn engines pulled from battle debris fields, working for months to understand the principles behind them. Eventually they built something similar, though not identical. A human version that traded some of the raw speed for better fuel efficiency and easier mass production. It meant human ships could be built faster and in greater numbers, even if each individual ship was slightly less powerful than its Skarn counterpart. Skarn shields worked by projecting a layered energy field that absorbed and dispersed incoming damage. Human engineers could not replicate this perfectly, but they found a workaround, stacking multiple weaker shield generators together to create a similar effect, layer after layer of overlapping protection that took longer to fail, even if any single layer was weaker than the Skarn version. And Skarn weapons, the plasma cannons that had torn through human ships in the early battles of the war, were studied and copied and eventually improved upon by human weapons designers who had 6 years and thousands of engineers working on nothing else. By the 4th year of the project, the hidden fleet had grown to over 1,000 ships, and Torres, now promoted to fleet admiral of what remained of humanity's official forces, made a decision that would define the final phase of the war. She needed the Skarn to believe, completely and totally, that humanity's fighting spirit had finally broken. She needed one last visible defeat, one final humiliation, so devastating that the Skarn would stop watching closely, stop worrying about hidden threats, and simply move to finish the job. That final defeat needed a symbol. A ship that would stand as the last visible piece of human resistance, broadcasting defiance, right up until the moment the Skarn arrived to destroy it, drawing their entire attention, while the true fleet, now grown to thousands of ships, prepared its final positions in hidden pockets of space scattered across the solar system. Marcus Hale had volunteered for that mission the moment he heard about it. "You understand what you're asking for," Torres had told him, in a private meeting, 3 months before the mission began. "This ship will not be one of our best. It needs to look damaged, worn down, barely functional, so the Skarn believe it truly is the last thing we have left. You'll have minimal weapons, minimal shields. If the Skarn decide to destroy the ship the moment they find it, without stopping to gloat or investigate, there will be very little chance of survival." "I understand," Hale had said. "I want to do this." Why? Hale had thought about his brother, about the Jupiter battle 6 years earlier, about all the friends and family members lost in the long years since the war began. He thought about all the people who had died believing the war was already lost, never knowing about the secret fleet growing in the shadows, never getting to see the moment when humanity finally turned the tables. "Because I want to be the one who gets to say it," Hale said. "I want to be the last voice they hear before they realize how wrong they were. Every colony that fell, every ship we lost, every person who died thinking we had nothing left, I want to speak for them in that moment. I want the Skarn to understand exactly what they were fooled by, and I want to be looking at their fleet when they finally figure it out." Torres had studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. "The ship will be called Gideon's Wrath. It's a good name." "It's a good mission," Hale replied. The final 3 months of preparation had been the hardest of the entire war. The hidden fleet, now numbering over 4,000 ships, spread across dozens of secret shipyards and staging points, needed to be coordinated for a single, simultaneous arrival. This required a new kind of technology, a network of hidden signal relays placed throughout the solar system, capable of transmitting a coordinated jump signal to every hidden fleet segment at the exact same moment, triggering their engines to activate together, tearing through space to arrive in a single overwhelming wave. Hale's ship, the Gideon's Wrath, would carry the master trigger, a device built into its communication systems, disguised so thoroughly that even the ship's own crew, aside from Hale and 2 trusted officers, did not know it existed. When Hale spoke the final activation code into his comm system, hidden inside what would sound to any listening Skarn ears like a simple defiant message, it would trigger the entire hidden fleet to converge on his position. Everything depended on the Skarn finding the ship, believing it to be exactly what it appeared to be, and taking the time to gloat before destroying it. Torres and her planners had studied Skarn behavior patterns for years, and they were confident in one thing above all others. The Skarn loved to savor their victories. They rarely destroyed a defeated enemy quickly when they had the chance to make a show of it first. Fleet Marshal Threx, the commander leading the final assault on the solar system, had a well-documented history of pausing before final kills, of speaking to defeated enemies, of turning victories into moments of theater. It was, Torres had believed, his one exploitable weakness: pride. And so the trap was set. Hale took command of the Gideon's Wrath. 3 weeks before the final Skarn assault began, guiding the crippled-looking vessel into a slow drift toward the outer edge of the solar system, broadcasting a looping message of defiance, waiting for Skarn scouts to find him. They found him exactly on schedule. And Fleet Marshal Threx, exactly as predicted, brought his fleet in close, hailed the ship, and began to speak. Now, as the Skarn fleet hung motionless in space, surrounded by thousands of human warships that had appeared from nowhere, Hale sat in the command chair of the Gideon's Wrath and allowed himself a small, tired smile. 6 years of planning, 6 years of secrecy, 6 years of losing worlds and burying friends while carrying a secret too heavy to share, had all led to this single moment. "Sir," said his communications officer, a young lieutenant named Priya Nair, her voice tight with nervous excitement. "Fleet Admiral Torres is hailing us. She says the main fleet is in position and awaiting your signal." Hale looked at the view screen, at the endless rows of human ships surrounding the stunned Skarn formation. Somewhere out there, on the bridge of the flagship. Endurance. Admiral Torres was watching the same view he was. 6 years of work finally paying off in this single, perfect moment. "Patch me through to the fleet," Hale said. "All ships." "Channel open, sir." Hale straightened in his chair, thinking briefly of his brother, of every person lost in 6 years of secret war, of every worker, in every hidden shipyard, who had spent years building ships they were told were something else entirely, never knowing the true purpose of their work, until this exact moment, when it would finally be revealed. "This is Captain Marcus Hale, aboard the Gideon's Wrath," he said, his voice carrying across the comm network to every one of the 4,000 ships waiting in the dark. "6 years ago we made a promise to each other. We said we would build something the enemy could never see coming. Today, they're finally seeing it." He paused, looking at the image of the Skarn flagship on his screen, at Fleet Marshal Threx's furious, disbelieving face still visible on the connection that had not fully closed. "Fleet Admiral Torres, the fleet is yours. Let's finish this." Fleet Admiral Rebecca Torres stood on the bridge of the Endurance, humanity's newest and largest dreadnought, and watched the same view screen that showed the entire outer solar system, now filled with human warships. She had waited 6 years for this exact moment, and now that it had finally arrived, she found herself surprisingly calm. All the fear, all the doubt, all the sleepless nights spent wondering if the plan would work, if the secret would hold, if humanity would survive long enough to see this day, had settled into a quiet, focused certainty. "All fleet segments report ready, Admiral," said her tactical officer, a sharp young woman named Chen. "Formation is complete. Weapons charged across every vessel. We are awaiting your order." Torres looked at the display, showing the Skarn fleet. 83 ships clustered together in the center of a human formation that stretched for millions of kilometers in every direction. 83 ships against 4,000. The math had always been the entire point of Project Hydra, but seeing it made real, seeing the actual numbers on the screen, still filled her with a strange mixture of triumph and grief. Triumph, because 6 years of sacrifice had led to this moment of overwhelming strength. Grief, because she could not stop thinking about all the people who had not lived to see it, the colonies burned before their time, the soldiers who died in the visible war, never knowing about the hidden fleet growing behind them. Her own daughter, killed in the second year of the war, in a Skarn raid on a farming colony that had no strategic value at all, destroyed simply to send a message of terror to the rest of humanity. Torres pushed the memory down, the way she had learned to do 1,000 times over the past 6 years. There would be time to grieve later. Right now there was a battle to win. "Captain Hale has given the signal," she said. "All ships, engage the enemy. No mercy, no hesitation. We end this today." The order rippled outward across the fleet, carried by thousands of communication relays, reaching every human ship in the formation within seconds. And then, in perfect coordination, the human fleet opened fire. The scale of the attack was almost impossible to comprehend. 4,000 warships, each carrying dozens of weapon systems, fired simultaneously on the trapped Skarn fleet. The space around the Devourer of Stars and its escort vessels lit up with more firepower than had been unleashed in any single battle in the history of either species. Skarn shields, strong as they were, had never been designed to withstand an assault of this magnitude. Ship after ship staggered under the impact, shields flaring bright before failing entirely, hulls cracking open as human weapons found their marks. Aboard the Devourer of Stars, Fleet Marshal Threx gripped the arms of his command chair as his ship shuddered under the impact of 100 simultaneous hits. Alarms blared across the bridge. Damage reports scrolled faster than anyone could read them. Shields at 40% and falling, Vex shouted over the noise. We're losing the Ravager and the Blackthorn. Both destroyed. The Ironclaw has lost main power. Threx forced himself to think clearly despite the chaos. Panic would kill them faster than any human weapon. Full evasive maneuvers, all ships. Break formation, do not present a single target. Return fire on the nearest enemy vessels, concentrate on their capital ships. The Skarn fleet scattered, ships breaking away from their tight formation to avoid presenting an easy target, weapons firing back at the human ships surrounding them. Skarn weapons were still powerful, still capable of tearing through human hull plating with brutal efficiency, and for a few moments the battle seemed almost balanced, human ships taking damage even as they inflicted it. But the numbers told the true story. For every Skarn ship, there were nearly 50 human vessels. Even as individual Skarn ships fought back fiercely, destroying human vessel after human vessel, the sheer weight of the human fleet ground the Skarn formation down with terrible speed. Within the first 10 minutes of the battle, a third of the Skarn fleet had been destroyed or disabled. Threx watched the destruction unfold on his tactical display with growing horror. This was not a battle in any sense he understood. This was an extermination, and his fleet, the pride of the Skarn Dominion, was the one being exterminated. Fleet Marshal, we cannot win this engagement, Vex said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Recommend immediate retreat. Full emergency jump. Abandon the system. Threx wanted to argue, wanted to find some way to salvage the battle, some clever tactic that could turn the tide. But he had spent enough years as a military commander to recognize a lost cause when he saw one. Pride had brought him to this moment. Pride and overconfidence, believing the war already won when it had, in fact, only just truly begun. Signal the fleet, Threx said, the words bitter in his mouth. All ships, emergency jump, rally point Kepler Station. We are retreating. But even as the order went out, Torres, watching from the bridge of the Endurance, had anticipated exactly this response. Project Hydra had not only built the hidden fleet, it had also developed new technology, specifically designed to counter the Skarn's faster-than-light engines, a jamming system that could interfere with the delicate energy fields Skarn ships needed to activate their jump drives. Deploy the jump disruptors, Torres ordered. Do not let a single Skarn vessel escape this system. Across the human fleet, specialized ships began broadcasting a powerful jamming field, a technology developed in secret over the final 2 years of Project Hydra, built specifically for this moment. Skarn ships attempting to activate their jump engines found the process failing, their carefully tuned energy fields disrupted by the interference, leaving them stranded in normal space, trapped within range of the human fleet's weapons. Aboard the Devourer of Stars, an engineering officer's panicked voice cut through the chaos of the bridge. Fleet Marshal, jump drive is not responding. Something is interfering with the activation sequence. Threx felt something cold settle in his chest, a feeling he had not experienced in decades, not since he was a young officer facing his first true combat. It was the feeling of being completely, utterly trapped. All ships, report jump status, Threx ordered, though he already suspected the answer. The responses came back one after another, each one confirming his worst fears. No Skarn ship in the fleet could activate its jump drive. They were trapped in the system, surrounded by an enemy fleet 50 times their size, with no way to escape. Torres watched the confirmation come through on her own tactical display, that every Skarn ship remaining in the system was now stranded, unable to flee. She felt no joy in the moment, only a grim sense of purpose. This was not about revenge, not really, though there were certainly people in the fleet who felt that way, who had lost enough family and friends to want nothing more than to see every Skarn ship burn. For Torres, This was about ending a war that had cost humanity too much already, ending it as quickly and decisively as possible, before more lives could be lost. "Continue the assault," she ordered. "Target their remaining capital ships first. Break their command structure." The battle continued for another 2 hours, though the outcome had been decided within the first 10 minutes. Skarn ship after Skarn ship fell under the relentless fire of the human fleet, their shields failing, their hulls breaking apart, their crews either dying in the vacuum of space, or, for the fortunate few, managing to escape in emergency pods before their vessels were completely destroyed. Aboard the Devourer of Stars, Threx watched his fleet die around him, ship by ship, unable to do anything to stop it. His flagship itself had taken severe damage, 3 of its 4 main engines destroyed, weapon systems failing one after another, as human fire continued to pound against its weakening shields. "Fleet Marshal," Vex said quietly, his voice hollow with exhaustion and grief. "We have lost 61 ships, 22 remain, all severely damaged. Shall I signal for surrender?" Threx sat in his command chair, staring at the wreckage of his once proud fleet scattered across the screen, burning debris drifting silently in the vacuum, where warships had been only hours before. 61 ships, thousands of Skarn lives, warriors he had commanded for years, some for decades, all gone in a single battle against an enemy he had believed was already defeated. The concept of surrender was almost foreign to Skarn military culture. Their entire philosophy was built on the idea that strength decided outcomes, that weakness deserved destruction. A Skarn commander who surrendered was considered to have failed not just militarily, but morally, to have proven himself unworthy of the strength his people valued above all else. But Threx looked at the numbers, at the impossible mathematics of 83 ships against 4,000, and understood, with a clarity that felt almost like relief, that there was no honor left to be found in this battle. Only more death, more waste, more Skarn lives, thrown away against an enemy that had already proven itself, in this single engagement, to be far stronger than anyone in the Skarn Dominion had ever imagined. "Open a channel to the human flagship," Threx said quietly. Vex looked at him with something like surprise, but he did not argue. "Yes, Fleet Marshal." The channel opened, and a moment later, Admiral Torres's face appeared on the screen, calm and composed, despite the chaos of the battle, still visible in the background behind her. "Fleet Marshal Threx," Torres said, "I assume you're calling to discuss terms." Threx felt the weight of 6 years of war, of every lost battle and every burned colony, pressing down on him in this single moment. "You have won this engagement, Admiral. I acknowledge that. I request terms for the surrender of my remaining ships and crews." Torres was quiet for a long moment, studying him through the screen. "Before we discuss terms, Fleet Marshal, I want to make something clear to you. This battle was never about destroying your fleet completely, though we certainly could have. It was about proving something, proving that we are not the weak, dying species you believed us to be, proving that 6 years of watching us lose worlds and burn colonies was not the whole story." "You have proven it," Threx said, "more thoroughly than I would have believed possible." "Good," Torres said. "Then let's discuss what happens next, because this war is not over yet, Fleet Marshal. Not by a long way." The words hung in the air between them, carried across the vacuum of space by the comm channel, connecting the 2 flagships. Threx frowned, confusion cutting through his exhaustion and grief. "What do you mean, this war is not over? Your fleet has destroyed 61 of my ships. The rest are crippled and stranded. There is nothing left for me to fight with." "I'm not talking about this battle," Torres said. "I'm talking about the war between our 2 species, Fleet Marshal. The Skarn Dominion did not send its entire military to conquer Earth. This fleet, the one we just destroyed, was only a fraction of your total forces. Your homeworld remains untouched. Your other conquered territories remain under Skarn control. If we stop here, if we accept your surrender and simply let you return home to report this defeat, what happens next?" Threx did not answer immediately, because he already knew the answer, and he suspected Torres knew it too. "The Dominion will send a larger fleet," he said finally. "A punitive force, larger and more powerful than what you just destroyed. They will not make the mistake of underestimating you a second time. They will bring dreadnoughts, capable of glassing entire planets from orbit. They will not stop until Earth is nothing but ash. That's what I thought you'd say, Torres replied. So you understand the position we're in. We can't simply win this battle and go home, Fleet Marshal. Winning this battle only ensures that the next attack will be even more devastating than the last. We need something more than a single victory. We need this war to actually end. What are you proposing? Torres leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable. I'm proposing something that I suspect will be very difficult for a species like yours to accept, Fleet Marshal. I'm proposing a real peace. Not a surrender, not a conquest, but an actual end to the fighting, negotiated between equals. Threx laughed, though there was little humor in the sound. Equals? Admiral, your entire species was built to believe you were losing this war, until 3 hours ago. Now you expect the Skarn Dominion, an empire that has never lost a war in its entire recorded history, to simply agree to peace as if nothing has happened? I expect the Skarn Dominion to look at the numbers, Fleet Marshal, the same way you just did before deciding to surrender your fleet. We built 4,000 ships in 6 years, in complete secrecy, using technology reverse-engineered from your own wreckage and improved upon by minds your intelligence networks apparently never took seriously. If we can do that in 6 years, what do you think we can do in 12? In 20? Your Dominion has enjoyed easy victories for 2 centuries because every species you've encountered gave up quickly, or fought you head-on, and lost badly enough to be wiped out entirely. We did neither. We adapted. And species that can adapt that quickly tend to keep adapting. Threx was silent for a long moment, considering her words. He had spent his entire career believing in the fundamental truth of Skarn philosophy, that strength decided outcomes, that weaker species existed to be conquered by stronger ones. But the battle he had just lived through, the impossible defeat inflicted by a species his intelligence reports had assured him was already broken, forced him to confront an uncomfortable question. What if strength was not a fixed, permanent quality? What if it could grow, change, adapt in ways the rigid Skarn philosophy had never accounted for? Even if I agreed with you, Threx said slowly, even if I believed peace was the wiser path, I do not have the authority to negotiate on behalf of the Dominion. That authority rests with the Grand Council on our homeworld. I am a fleet marshal, not a diplomat. Then you'll need to become one, at least temporarily, Torres said, because I'm not offering this choice to anyone else. You're the commander who found this fleet, the one who will report back to your council about what happened here today. How you frame that report, Fleet Marshal, could determine whether the next fleet the Dominion sends is an invasion force or a delegation. Threx considered this, understanding the weight of what she was asking. His report to the Grand Council would carry enormous influence over their next decision. If he reported simple defeat, an embarrassing loss that needed to be avenged, the Council would almost certainly authorize a massive punitive expedition, one that could indeed threaten to destroy Earth entirely, regardless of the cost in Skarn lives and resources. But if he reported something different, if he reported a species that had proven itself capable of matching or exceeding Skarn military technology within a single generation, a species that offered peace rather than demanding total victory even after achieving overwhelming battlefield superiority, the Council might see a different path forward. You would be asking me to essentially argue against my own species' traditions, Threx said. The Skarn Dominion has never negotiated peace as equals with any species we have fought. We have only ever accepted surrenders, or continued fighting until total victory. I know, Torres said. That's exactly why I'm asking you to be the first to do something different. Fleet Marshal, I lost my daughter in this war. 3 years ago, in a raid on a colony with no military value at all. I have spent 6 years building a fleet capable of doing to your Dominion exactly what your forces did to us, burning your worlds, killing your people, taking whatever revenge I could imagine. I have that fleet now. I could use it, but I don't want to. Not because I've forgiven what happened, but because I understand something your philosophy apparently doesn't account for. Wars that only end in total victory for one side tend to breed the conditions for the next war. If we destroy your Dominion today, some other species will eventually rise to challenge whoever is left, and the cycle continues. I want something different. I want an actual ending. Not a pause between wars, but a real peace. Threx studied her face on the screen, searching for some sign of deception, some hidden motive behind her words. he found none. Only a tired, determined honesty that reminded him, strangely, of his own feelings after the battle, the exhaustion of a commander who had seen enough death for one lifetime. "I will need to consult with my surviving officers," Threx said finally. "And I will need proof, something concrete to bring back to the Council. Evidence of your fleet's true capabilities. Not simply my word describing an impossible defeat that they may refuse to believe." "I can provide that," Torres said. "Full sensor data from the battle, detailed specifications of our ship capabilities, enough information to convince even the most skeptical member of your council that continuing this war would be extraordinarily costly for the Dominion. I'm not trying to hide our strength from you anymore, Fleet Marshal. The entire point of Project Hydra was to reveal it at exactly the right moment, and that moment is now." Across the solar system, the remnants of the human and Skarn fleets held their positions, the battle having ended in an uneasy ceasefire while their commanders negotiated. Aboard the Gideon's Wrath, Captain Hale watched the exchange on a secondary feed patched through from the Endurance, listening to Torres and Threx discuss the possibility of a peace that, 6 years ago, would have seemed like an impossible fantasy. "Do you think he'll actually take the offer, sir?" Lieutenant Nair asked, standing beside Hale's command chair. Hale considered the question carefully before answering. "I think Fleet Marshal Threx just watched everything he believed about strength and weakness get turned upside down in the span of a few hours. That's not something a person recovers from quickly. But if he's smart, and I think he is, he'll understand that the Admiral is offering the Dominion a way out that doesn't end in total destruction. Whether his council is smart enough to accept that offer, that's a different question entirely. And if they don't accept it?" Hale looked out at the vast human fleet surrounding what remained of the Skarn forces, 4,000 ships built in 6 years of secret labor, a testament to what humanity could accomplish when pushed to its absolute limits. "Then we do this again," Hale said. "Except next time, we won't be the ones pretending to be weak." On the bridge of the Devourer of Stars, Threx made his decision. He thought of his own people, back on the Skarn homeworld, of the centuries of unbroken conquest that had shaped their entire civilization, of the pride and tradition that would resist any suggestion of negotiating as equals with a species they had always considered beneath them. He thought, too, of the 61 ships he had lost in a single afternoon, of the thousands of Skarn lives extinguished by an enemy his own intelligence reports had assured him was already defeated. Strength decides, weakness dies. It was the oldest truth of Skarn civilization, the foundation of everything they believed about themselves and their place in the galaxy. But today, for the first time in his long career, Threx had witnessed something that did not fit neatly into that philosophy. He had witnessed a species that had been weak, truly weak, choose not to simply accept its fate, but to work, plan, and sacrifice for 6 long years until weakness became strength. And when that strength finally arrived, it had not been used for total annihilation, but had instead been offered as leverage for peace. Perhaps, Threx thought, strength and weakness were not the only forces that decided the fate of civilizations. Perhaps patience, and the willingness to endure hardship for a greater purpose, mattered just as much. "Admiral Torres," Threx said, his voice steady, despite the enormity of what he was about to agree to. "I will carry your offer back to the Grand Council. I will tell them exactly what I witnessed here today, without exaggeration and without diminishment. Whether they choose to accept your terms for peace, I cannot promise. But I will make the strongest case I can for ending this war, through negotiation, rather than further bloodshed." "That's all I'm asking, Fleet Marshal," Torres said. "One honest report, one real chance at peace. What happens after that will depend on both our people's willingness to choose a different path than the one we've been walking." Threx nodded slowly, understanding that whatever happened next, whether his council accepted the offer or rejected it and sent an even larger fleet to finish what this one had failed to accomplish, the galaxy had changed today, in ways that could never be undone. Humanity had proven itself capable of matching the Skarn Dominion's military might, and more than that, had proven itself capable of choosing mercy, even in the moment of total victory. It was, Threx realized, exactly the kind of strength his own philosophy had never taught him to recognize. 3 months passed before an answer came back from the Skarn homeworld. 3 months that felt, to everyone involved in Project Hydra, like the longest wait of the entire war. The surviving Skarn ships had been allowed to depart the solar system, under the terms of the ceasefire, carrying Fleet Marshal Threx and his full report back to the Grand Council. In the meantime, Admiral Torres and the human fleet remained on high alert, watching for any sign that the Dominion had decided to answer with force instead of diplomacy. During those 3 months, humanity worked to repair the damage of 6 years of war. Colonies that had survived the fighting began rebuilding. Refugee populations that had fled to hidden habitats during the darkest years of Project Hydra were slowly resettled, though many worlds remained too damaged for immediate habitation. The full scope of Project Hydra was finally revealed to the public, and for the first time, ordinary citizens learned the true story behind 6 years of what they had believed were meaningless, hopeless defeats. The reaction was complicated. There was anger, from people who had lost loved ones during the years of secrecy, who felt betrayed that the truth had been hidden from them, even as they buried family members and watched their homes burn. There was also profound relief, and something close to awe, as people began to understand the scale of what had been accomplished in secret, the sacrifice and dedication of thousands of workers and engineers who had spent years building a fleet they were told was something else entirely, never knowing the true purpose of their labor until the final battle revealed it all at once. Captain Marcus Hale found himself something of a reluctant public figure after the battle, his message of defiance broadcast on that final day, becoming one of the defining images of the war's turning point. He gave few interviews, preferring to remain with his crew as the Gideon's Wrath underwent repairs, but he could not entirely avoid the attention that came with being the voice that had, in a very real sense, triggered the arrival of humanity's secret fleet. "They keep asking me how it felt," Hale told Torres during one of their regular briefings aboard the Endurance. 3 weeks after the battle, sitting there, broadcasting that message, waiting for Threx's fleet to arrive, not knowing for certain if the trigger signal would even work. "What do you tell them?" Torres asked. Hale considered the question for a moment. "I tell them it felt like waiting for the last piece of a plan, 6 years in the making, to either succeed or fail completely. There wasn't really room for fear in that moment, not the way people imagine, just focus. Just making sure I said the right words, at the right time, so that everything the workers and engineers and planners had built in secret would finally have a chance to matter." Torres nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. She had felt something similar herself, standing on the bridge of the Endurance, watching the trigger signal spread across thousands of hidden ships scattered throughout the solar system, waiting to see if 6 years of secrecy and sacrifice would finally pay off, or collapse into failure at the final moment. The message from the Skarn homeworld arrived on a quiet morning, transmitted through the same diplomatic channel that Threx had used to establish contact before departing 3 months earlier. Torres received the notification while reviewing repair schedules for the fleet, and she felt her hands go still over her datapad as she read the header information confirming the source. She called an emergency meeting of her senior staff within the hour, gathering in the same conference room aboard the Endurance, where so many critical decisions of Project Hydra had been made over the past 6 years. Hale attended by video connection from the Gideon's Wrath, along with a dozen other officers and advisors who had been central to the secret war effort. "The message is from the Grand Council directly," Torres told the assembled group. "Not from Fleet Marshal Threx, though his report is referenced extensively throughout. I'll read the relevant sections." She activated the translation on her screen, the Skarn diplomatic language rendered into careful, formal human phrasing. "The Grand Council of the Skarn Dominion acknowledges the report of Fleet Marshal Threx regarding the engagement at the Sol system. After extensive deliberation, the Council recognizes that the human species has demonstrated military and technological capabilities significantly beyond previous intelligence assessments. The Council further recognizes the strategic and philosophical implications of a continued conflict against an adversary capable of such rapid adaptation and growth." Torres paused, looking up at the faces around the room, all of them waiting anxiously for the conclusion. "The Council authorizes the opening of formal peace negotiations between the Skarn Dominion and the human species, to be conducted under terms of mutual respect and equal standing. Fleet Marshal Threx is designated as the Dominion's primary negotiator for these talks, given his direct experience with human capabilities and his recommendation that further military conflict would serve no beneficial purpose for either civilization. A wave of quiet relief spread through the room, though it was tempered by the knowledge that formal peace negotiations would still take time, that this message represented only the beginning of a long process, rather than an immediate end to hostilities. But it was, Torres knew, exactly the outcome she had hoped for when she made her offer to Threx 3 months earlier. "There's more," she said, and continued reading. The Council notes, with some difficulty, that Skarn philosophy has traditionally viewed strength and weakness as fixed and permanent qualities, determining the natural order of relations between species. The events at Sol have demonstrated that this view may require reconsideration. A species capable of transforming apparent weakness into overwhelming strength within a single generation cannot be simply categorized as either strong or weak in any permanent sense. The Council is prepared to explore what this means for future relations, not only with humanity, but potentially for Dominion philosophy more broadly. The message concluded with formal details about the proposed negotiation process, a neutral meeting location, a timeline for initial talks, and a request that Admiral Torres or a designated representative attend as humanity's primary negotiator. "They're actually reconsidering their entire philosophy," Hale said quietly, over the video connection. "Not just making peace with us specifically, but questioning the whole foundation of how they've treated every species they've ever encountered." "That's the hope, at least," Torres said. "Whether it actually leads to lasting change within the Dominion, that remains to be seen. But it's a start. A real start, not just a temporary ceasefire before the next war begins." Over the following months, formal negotiations began between human representatives and the Skarn Dominion, conducted at a neutral space station, constructed specifically for the purpose, located in a system claimed by neither species. Fleet Marshal Threx, true to the Council's designation, led the Dominion's negotiating team, and Admiral Torres found herself working alongside the very commander she had defeated in battle, now searching together for terms that could establish a lasting peace between their two civilizations. The negotiations were difficult, often tense, filled with the kind of careful, painstaking compromise that any real peace requires. Territory disputes needed to be settled, reparations discussed for the colonies destroyed during the war, technology sharing agreements negotiated that would allow both species to benefit from what had been learned during 6 years of conflict without giving either side an unfair advantage. There were setbacks, moments when talks nearly collapsed entirely, when old grievances and deep mistrust threatened to undo months of careful progress. But slowly, methodically, a framework for peace began to take shape. Humanity retained control of its core worlds and colonies, with the Dominion agreeing to withdraw entirely from any human territory it had occupied during the war. In exchange, humanity agreed to certain limits on military expansion into neutral space, a compromise that satisfied neither side completely, but that both were willing to accept, in exchange for an actual end to the fighting. Perhaps most significantly, the two species established a formal diplomatic relationship, the first the Skarn Dominion had ever maintained, with a species it had not either conquered outright or driven to complete surrender. Trade agreements followed, cautious at first, then gradually expanding, as both civilizations began to see the benefits of cooperation over continued hostility. Marcus Hale eventually left active military service, though he remained a respected figure within the reorganized United Earth Fleet, occasionally called upon to speak with new officers about the lessons of Project Hydra and the 6 years of patient, secret work that had ultimately turned the tide of the war. He often told them the same thing, a lesson he had carried with him since that final broadcast aboard the Gideon's Wrath. Waiting for the fleet to arrive. "Strength isn't always visible," he would say. "Sometimes the greatest strength is the patience to build something slowly, in secret, while everyone around you believes you're already defeated." The Skarn thought they understood us, because they saw our weakest moments, our worst defeats, our most desperate broadcasts. They never saw the 6 years of work happening in the shadows behind every loss. That's the lesson worth remembering, not just about war, but about anything worth building. The visible failures aren't always the whole story. 2 years after the peace agreement was formally signed, Admiral Rebecca Torres stood once again on the bridge of the Endurance. Though the ship had been repurposed as a diplomatic vessel rather than a warship, its weapons systems reduced and its interior redesigned for the ongoing work of maintaining peace between two civilizations that had once seemed destined for total, mutual destruction. She thought often of her daughter, of all the lives lost during the long years of secret war, of the terrible cost that had purchased this fragile, still developing peace. It had not been a perfect victory. Nothing about war, even a war that ended in genuine peace rather than total conquest, could ever be called perfect. But looking out at the star systems now connected by trade routes between human and Scarn space, at the slow, careful cooperation growing between two species that had once tried to destroy each other completely, Torres allowed herself to believe that the 6 years of sacrifice, the secret shipyards, the hidden fleet, and the final gamble made aboard a crippled ship called Gideon's Wrath had all been worth the cost. The galaxy had learned something new that day at Sol, something that would ripple outward for generations to come. Weakness, patiently endured and quietly transformed, could become the greatest strength of all. And sometimes, the wisest use of overwhelming power was not to destroy an enemy completely, but to offer them a chance at something better than endless war. Humanity had found itself facing what looked like certain destruction, and had answered not with despair, but with 6 years of quiet, determined work, and in the end, with an offer of peace that no one, least of all the Scarn Dominion, had ever expected to receive. It was, in the end, a victory built not on vengeance, but on patience, sacrifice, and the stubborn, unbreakable hope that humanity had never truly lost, even in its darkest hours.